I'm Johnny Dorminy, and today I'll perform Selling the President, Calvin Coolidge on the Frontier of the Radio Age. In 1924, Calvin Coolidge ran for President of the United States. However, he faced long odds as a president who only rose to the office because his predecessor passed away. To win the presidency in his own right, Coolidge needed a new way to reach voters. By speaking directly into the homes of millions of Americans through the radio, Coolidge tackled this frontier and became the first radio president. Let's join President Coolidge on December 4, 1923, after his first radio address in response to President Harding's death. You wish to speak with me. I am well known for my frugality with words. Not long ago, I was at a White House dinner when the lady next to me leaned over and whispered into my ear, "Now, Mr. Vice President, I must engage you in conversation tonight, as I've made a bet that I can get you to say at least 3 words. To which I simply replied, "You lose," and said no more to her the entire evening. That was my quiet life as Vice President. I presided over the Senate, helped in negotiations, and tried my best to stay out of the scandals brewing all around me. That was until President Harding suddenly passed away. The office of Vice President is one of comparative obscurity. Few of my fellow countrymen have ever heard anything about me, despite my numerous previous offices. You can imagine how concerned these people were when they learned that the president had died, and now some man they knew nothing about was their new president. Thankfully, I was given the opportunity to acquaint myself with the nation not many hours ago with my first radio address, and I used this frontier to speak directly into the homes of millions of my countrymen. The address itself was short and to the point. My administration would continue on the path set by my predecessor. Although it was not a speech that would do me great credit at a political rally, it was the perfect length for radio. With radio, you must consider the changing ether. You don't want your audience to hear you, but then suddenly lose you out of nowhere. Radio turned out to be perfect for my speech. My natural dislike of verbose oratory and my New England accent transmitted perfectly over the wireless. Well, I must admit, the stations that carried my speech did receive one complaint. Their audiences could clearly hear me turning the pages of my notes. Other than this, I quite liked the radio. Although Coolidge needed to campaign if he wanted to win the 1924 presidential election, he was a quiet man who disliked travel. Additionally, Coolidge's oldest son died of an infection not long into the campaign, casting a cloud of grief on the entire family. To solve these problems, Coolidge sought the help of an advertising magnate to find a way to use the new frontier of radio to campaign from afar. Let's join advertising legend Bruce Barton discussing the 1952 presidential election with Dwight D. Eisenhower, another candidate who pioneered a frontier in communications. General Eisenhower, I know how you'll win this election, but first, let me tell you about the 1924 election I helped win. Alright, in 1924, Calvin Coolidge was running for president. If he were to win, he would only be the second vice president who finished their predecessor's term to win the presidency in their own right. The first, of course, was Theodore Roosevelt. Now, Coolidge was a quiet man. He didn't like to talk, which is not ideal when you're running for president. Thankfully, I joined the campaign in the position of publicity man. After all, I made my fortune in advertising. I know better than anybody how to sell a product. Now I had to figure out how to sell a president, and worse, one that didn't like to talk. Thankfully, President Coolidge himself presented the solution. Coolidge's first radio address of December 1923 introduced him to the nation and was a huge success. After this, Coolidge began speaking regularly on the radio frontier. For example, in August of 24, Coolidge gave a speech accepting the GOP nominations for that year's election. 2,000 people crammed inside Washington's Constitution Hall, while another 10,000 listened outside through loudspeakers. However, the main audience of some 25 million listened through their own radios in their own homes from a network of broadcasters from the East Coast to the Rocky Mountains. Compare that to the estimated 13 million Theodore Roosevelt reached in his entire career. And Teddy liked to talk. Oh, and what about the Democrats, you ask? So, the DNC decided that 1924 was the year to do the first live broadcast of their national convention. The broadcast team that covered the event expected it to go just as smoothly as the Republican convention had the week before. Boy, were they in for a surprise. The Democratic National Convention of 1924 lasted 2 weeks and went to a record 103 ballots. After airing all their dirty laundry live to the nation, including a fistfight on the convention floor, the Democrats were not exactly enthusiastic to use the new frontier of radio to campaign. This gave Coolidge a virtual monopoly campaigning on the radio. Coolidge used this advantage to campaign effectively without leaving Washington. By speaking directly into the homes of the voters, Coolidge made them feel a personal connection to him. Today, we have a golden opportunity to repeat what Coolidge did in 1924, but we will use a new frontier, television. All the people need is to see your face in their living room TV. In the 1924 election, President Coolidge campaigned almost exclusively on the radio, and a major independent political leader ran as a third party. However, President Coolidge still won the election with 54% of the popular vote, giving him the White House for 4 more years. Let's join Jim Acosta in 2008 to hear his view of frontiers in communications and how they will affect elections to come. You want to know about frontiers in communications and how they'll affect future elections? I guess you noticed all of candidate Obama's ads on Facebook. Well, it's simple really. Candidate Obama is trying to use this new social media phenomenon in the same way other successful candidates have used frontiers in communication in their eras. Let me explain. In 1924, Calvin Coolidge became the first president to campaign on the radio. Despite the many challenges that faced his campaign, he won with a comfortable margin. These were the days when presidential candidates only campaigned through newspapers or big city speeches. The president was distant and impersonal to the average voter. However, Coolidge campaigned on the radio, speaking directly into people's homes. This made the voters feel a personal connection to him, which gave them a compelling reason to vote for him, instead of some random politician they wouldn't know from Adam. Well, that's not quite accurate, as, well, to tell you the truth, Coolidge would often go shopping in Washington and nobody would notice that the President of the United States was shopping at their favorite hat store. Despite this, people still felt a personal connection to him. After all, he had spoken to them. This was powerful enough to win the 1924 presidential election. In the middle of the 20th century, Eisenhower did the same thing with the new frontier of television. Eisenhower used minute-long or shorter TV ads to push his message in the last days of the campaign in a way his opponent could not counter. Today, we are at the beginning of an even bigger frontier, even bigger than radio. Before this election, social media was just for enthusiasts. However, in this election, candidate Obama tried to use this frontier to campaign. Honestly, I don't know if these social media platforms are up to the task yet, as advertising on them is pretty basic. However, these social media platforms truly are the frontier of communications. The first presidential candidate to campaign on the frontier of radio, Calvin Coolidge, seized the advantage and won his election. The first presidential candidate to campaign on the frontier of television, Dwight D. Eisenhower, seized the advantage and also won his election. Mark my words, the first presidential candidate who uses the new frontier of social media to speak directly into the homes of voters will change politics forever. In 1924, Calvin Coolidge ran for President of the United States. However, he faced long odds as a president who only rose to the office because his predecessor passed away. To win the presidency in his own right, Coolidge needed a new way to win voters. By speaking directly into the homes of millions of Americans through the radio, Coolidge tackled this frontier and became the first radio president. Thank you.